The biggest plus for the Lotus to me is in this car I feel like I need to push to have fun, where in the Lotus I'm just having fun. What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing a head-to-head. I don't think we've done one of these in a while, so we're doing between my 2021 Lotus Evora Gt and my dad's 2025 718 Spyder RS. Obviously I've done a lot of miles in these cars. I've done about 7,000 in this, and in the Porsche I've probably done about 500 to 1,000 behind the wheel and another couple hundred in the passenger seat. So I know the cars, I have a baseline. Going back to back, you always learn new things, so let's see what happens. Okay, so when you're going up against a 4-liter flat 6 that has to 9,000 RPM, it's not going to be easy to win a sound competition, but I wouldn't say the Lotus is that far off, to be honest. A big one for people that actually like driving their cars and don't just leave them in garages is ride quality. This doesn't have any settings. None of the modern Lotuses do. The Evora doesn't either. You can either order a sport chassis or a touring chassis. So it's just one set of shocks. That's how it's programmed. This is a pretty firm ride. It's probably one of the firmer rides I'm used to out of sports cars. Doesn't really bother me on a day-to-day basis, but if you're looking for a compliant ride, the Porsche will destroy this. The Porsche rides like a luxury car. It's actually really impressive how stiff the front end still is with how compliant it is. This is just stiff. The front end I would say is a little bit sharper on this car than it is on the Porsche. But part of that's also the hydraulic steering, just the feedback you get through the wheel, which we'll talk about in a second as we go down a back road. So my Evora obviously came with Cup 2s, which was amazing for steering feel, amazing for feedback, not great in low temperatures, and they wear out really quick. Now it's on Continental's Extreme Contacts, which are great tires, but they don't have the same feedback through the wheel. Steering feel is nowhere near as good as it used to be. It's still way better than the electric steering in the Porsche though. When you hit a bump and you still want to turn it, you get so much more feedback from this than you will in the Porsche, or really any car with electric steering, even in its semi-diluted state that it is now. You know exactly what the car is doing when it steps out, you know exactly how to correct it. Okay, now I'm just going to shut up and put the windows down and... The Porsche has a little more grip, but the turn-in is... This car just likes to rotate. It likes to have the rear a little out, and it just keeps going and push the throttle and it'll let you do it, and it won't snap, it won't overreact. It's just such a confident car, and if you're not used to the car, you're going to think the steering's a little less solid than the Porsche, I'd say. But once you've gotten a lot of miles on the chassis and you know what it's going to do, it's so predictable and so much fun. It's like exactly what you want from a driving experience. With all the other cars, you're thinking about all these things, but this is just drive. You get in, you drive. You get out, you want to go back and get in and drive again. There's just so much feedback through the wheel, even the lines on the road, every bump in the road. You almost could drive this car blind. So much better than any other car. I don't know how long you're gonna make it, but you're gonna feel like you can see with just how much feedback there is. If we're going back to things people actually care about, not just steering, which is in my head constantly. Practicality wise, the Porsche destroys this. It's got front and rear trunk. The front of this is just a radiator, and the rear trunk in this is half the size of the Porsche's rear trunk, and the Porsche's front trunk's pretty massive. It's also got more room in the footwells. You can just store stuff. The only big advantage this has is the back seats, which obviously don't fit normal size humans, but fit smaller humans, or a lot of storage. So it's storage, but I'd say the back seats are still probably less than you're gonna be able to put in the front of the Porsche, even though it gives you maybe a little more flexibility just in shape and stuff. But yeah, when I've had to use the Porsche or this for boxes for shoes or something like that, the Porsche is a lot better. One thing, I'd say the throttle response on these is actually pretty similar, even though you'd think the Toyota Camry V6 would be a lot worse than the Motorsport Flat 6, but I think it's actually very similar. This feels a little... It's hard to say because this has such a lower red line at about 7,000 and 9,000, so the power just comes on so much quicker, so much lower in the rev range. But it's just, this engine just immediately goes the second you put your foot down, and you can see the throttle opening up behind you, which is also pretty sick. Honestly, this car is just, it's hard to say this because But I'm just gonna say, I think this car feels like more of a driver's car. We'll see when I get in the Porsche if I'm gonna stick to that, but this car just feels more engaging to drive, doing little things, driving it hard. The only difference is you don't get that absolute symphony of an engine. Another weird one is before we got the Spyder RS, I would especially have said that this would get much better fuel economy. I've gotten up to 30 plus in this on the highway, and just going around town / driving it hard, still getting 22.6. But the Porsche actually on a normal day gets 18, 19 miles per gallon, which is really surprising. I think that's partially because of how much it prioritizes that with the shifting. If you leave it in automatic, it shifts like 1200 RPM, unless you put it in PDK Sport. So that's part of it, but it's actually unbelievable how good the fuel economy is in the Porsche. I have to give it props for that. One small negative on the Lotus is I thought it had a 13-gallon tank. According to Lotus, it actually has a 15-gallon tank. Some people report it as a 13, I'm not sure. I haven't really spoken to any owners about this. But on completely empty 0 miles of range, it never has taken more than 12.5, 12.6 gallons of fuel. So you do need to get gas more than you have to get in the Porsche. Okay, before we switch to the Porsche, let's enjoy that Camry V6 one more time. And more importantly, at this rev range, that Evora Gt supercharger. Welcome to the 2025 718 Spyder RS. First immediate reaction just switching cars. I actually like the weight of this steering better initially. The way up feels synthetic. It doesn't feel natural because obviously it's electric. And then the feedback is poor compared to the Lotus. Much better than old generations of the Porsche though, to be honest. Better than much better than 991, 911. Obviously it's a smaller car as well. But I think they've learned a little bit with electric steering at the same time. So the Lotus without the carbon pack, which is how my car is equipped, is supposed to be 3,175 pounds. This is a Visoc car, so before Visoc it's 3,214. So they're supposed to be very, very similar on weight, which it's just not how it feels in the car. The front end of this is just not quite as quick or reactive. You almost feel the weight transfer more in this car. But again, it's a much more solid feeling car through a corner. The Lotus, you kind of have to let it rotate and trust it, which I can because I have the mileage in it. But if you just put a random stranger in these cars, I think they'd be quicker to push in this, even on basically semi-slicks, Dunlop Race 2s, which especially in these temperatures are pretty scary. But the car just feels so solid, kind of a Porsche thing. The obvious elephant in the room here is the difference in price. So they're two completely different priced vehicles. Sticker on a Spyder RS starts around 162 for the final year. The Evora GT was about 105. I think mine's equipped to 107. I bought it used, so I'm not 100% positive. But that's a massive difference, especially with options. This car was 204, I think. And the Lotus, I paid used a quarter of that, almost. A little more than a quarter of that. So it's a massive price difference. And you have similar performance. I mean, 416 horsepower versus 493 is a decent jump, but if you look at the numbers and account for the transmission differences, it's not that crazy. This does pick up at a higher speed. I mean, the quarter mile is pretty far apart, where the 0 to 60 is kind of similar. Part of the giant cost difference though, that Golf is mostly options. I mean, all the carbon on the Lotus is free, diffuser, seats, the little trim pieces. On this, the Visoc package with the PTS, I think it's 25 grand, something like that. It's a massive, just one option right there, just a hit of the car. You know a car is really good when your biggest complaint about it is that it doesn't have Android Auto. Yes, that's annoying. But when it has a motorsport derived 4-liter flat 6 that revs to 9,000 RPM, you can forgive that. Tires will, bear in mind the tires will be a bit cold. As much as I love the Lotus and the noise that comes out of it, it does not make that noise. And I'm honestly fairly impressed with how easily the Dunlop warmed up there. I mean, a little slide, but nothing your right foot, a little lift can't handle. I was honestly very pleasantly surprised there. Every time I drive this car, I become more impressed by it because I have so much of a bad stigma against it from the 991 Speedster that we had for 6 years almost. But this is just a completely different kind of car. It's a sport. It's a true sports car. It's not a luxury car trying to be a sports car, trying to sound and look like a sports car. This is a sports car. Sports car with a racing engine, which that's what the Lotus doesn't have. As much charisma as that Camry engine puts out and how surprising it is, obviously it doesn't hold a candle to this, and that's really where, outside of just the badge, that's really where the price difference comes down. There is definitely more weight transfer of feeling in this than the Lotus, which is surprising for a Porsche RS product. But I mean, again, it's not a carbon tub or anything like that like a McLaren, and they did chop the roof off it, so that's probably a little bit of it. And the Lotus just does feel a bit stiffer, which of course it is because it is one mode, and I'm now realizing I didn't actually press the stiffer springs on this. But I don't know, when I put the stiffer springs button on this, you probably gain like 10% feel, and it's not quite up to the level of Lotus, but again, this is so much more compliant than the Lotus. You can probably see in the videos when we were on this road earlier, it's just the bouncing in this is very minimal. In the Lotus, it's not teeth chattering or anything like that, but it's pretty simple. As much as I like to roast Porsche, especially Porsche owners, I will obviously admit there's a huge quality advantage here too. I mean, the fit and finish is better, everything is more solid. The shifter doesn't just fall off every once in a while. Not saying that's happened on the Lotus, but it has, so. Obviously the Spyder RS doesn't come in a manual, it's not an option. But I'm happy with that. This feels like a motorsport vehicle. It really does feel like it's tuned for a PDK, and this PDK is about as good as a dual clutch is gonna get. I liked making fun of people because my dad's old 991.1, apparently there's like a PDK Sport transmission for the GT cars and a regular PDK transmission. This is dramatically better than that. I don't know what they've updated over the years, but this is just night and day. When you're just driving around, this car really makes no sound at all. If you just let it stay in auto, it'll go in 7th and kind of stay there under 2,000 RPM, and it's a nice, comfortable, quiet ride. The Lotus is always on, especially with a manual transmission. It does make those daily drives a little more fun, where this is kind of just a normal car until you tell it not to be, which is a plus and a minus. Depends on what you want to do with it. This definitely has way more range, both in engine and suspension, than the Lotus. The biggest plus for the Lotus to me is in this car, I feel like I need to push to have fun, where in the Lotus, I'm just having fun. The feel of the steering, the pedals, everything feels so much better in the Lotus. You're so engaged all the time. In this, when I'm driving like this, I might as well be in any other car. Part of that boils down to dual clutch versus manual, but it's not all of that. There is just that extra special something in the Lotus. One last sound clip before we get out and talk this over. Feedback and driver engagement, both throttle pedal, brake pedal, steering, everything goes Lotus. Engine goes Porsche, practicality goes Porsche, comfort goes Porsche, which is ironic because it doesn't have a roof. I don't know, if it depends what kind of drive I'm going for. If I'm going for a chill drive, if I'm just doing my daily commute, that kind of stuff, that car makes everything more fun. If I want to go hair on fire, 9,000 RPM down a back road, straight line track, whatever, I'm going with that. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I answer the question. If there's any questions you guys have on either car, let me know. I have multiple videos on both. There'll be more coming. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good one.